men have enough stressors in their daily lives. They don't need someone in their life to make it harder. Like even in the city I'm in, we're talking $3,000 for a little studio, one bedroom apartment. There are things out of your control, obviously, that just come up. And for some reason, this is controversial to say, but yes, men have eternal battles as well. Men have demons that they are facing in private. Men have things that they're dealing with. And if a woman's going to come into a man's life, it should not make the man's life harder. They should not come home and have to be bombarded with insults and orders and all different kinds of stuff. They should not have to play hurdles and games to be in a relationship to begin with. And then even when they do land the number or get in the relationship, it's more hurdles and games. And it turns into absolute chaos. A while back I was talking to a friend of mine. It's interesting because I didn't think much of it at the time, but I understand a lot more what he meant by it now. He was a little bit younger than me. He was 27 at the time, and he had told me he has a daughter, and me and him were talking kind of about having kids. And I told him, down the line, I think it would be ideal to get married and have kids. And he told me something to the extent of basically, dude, in the West, don't do it. Just don't do it. And as I've gotten to an age where I've seen more men either getting married and having kids or contemplating that, I've seen a very common trend of absolute horror stories in dating and relationships. And it's just something to the point where, looking at this from the outside, of course you don't want to be closed-minded. Of course you should be open-minded and acknowledge that, sure, there's a exception to every rule. But most of the time, it's absolute nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. Most people in relationships are miserable. Most people in relationships are doing it involuntarily. And what's so interesting is that, a lot of men that call this kind of stuff out, a lot of men that choose, by the way, choose to stay single, are labeled things like incel, essentially that's involuntary. But what's so ironic is that a lot of men I know in these toxic relationships, or a lot of people I've seen in them, that's really involuntary because they're afraid to put the foot down and end things. They can't handle being single. I mean, I've seen so many men absolutely ruined by relationships, ruined by breakups. They're not the same. Too many men, quite frankly, I've seen destroyed by women. And it's scary too, because even a lot of women who you'd think you could take seriously and lead to marriage, like this whole tradcon thing. I mean, these tradcon women that I see, that to me is just a grift as far as I'm concerned. It's just a complete grift. And even on social media, I've seen plenty of girls who will have Bible verses in their bio, which great, I'm all for that. But then they'll be posting pictures of in bikinis and this kind of stuff, and even in some cases, links to certain things that I don't even need to go into detail of. And you'd have to ask yourself, this is just pandering to men. That's what this is. That's just trying to pander to a certain base of men just for money, just for clout. It's a grift. It's fake. And again, a lot of men I see falling for this kind of stuff. The worst part is that you have a lot of gaslighting towards men who basically say, look, if we're going to be in a relationship, you have to respect boundaries. You have to respect the fact that you can't go to nightclubs. You can't go to bars. You can't do certain things just out of principle. If you're in a relationship, you should not be going to bars and nightclubs. And I've seen cases, actually I had a family member of mine who, they were married at the time, or they were married, and his wife was going to nightclubs behind his back, and he wasn't even really thinking much of it at the time, and to no surprise they're divorced now. But understand something, when I was younger, when I was in my very early 20s, I used to go to nightclubs, and quite frankly it was just out of insecurity and the people around me, which it's not something I would do now. Even back then I thought it was foolish, but I understand that the main reason people go to nightclubs is to sleep around. At least in the city I'm in. That's the main reason people go to these nightclubs or bars, whatever you want to call it, nightlife, whatever you want to call it. And it's not about, girls having fun. Look, if a girl's going out with a group of girls or by herself, especially, not with her boyfriend or husband, whatever, to a nightclub or bar, it's finished. That is the end of the relationship. And there's no amount of gaslighting that should convince men otherwise. You're not insecure because you feel that way. You're not being controlling. You're not being manipulative. That's ultimately the manipulation, because the reality is, with respect and principle, there should have never been a desire or even interest or any crossing your mind to go somewhere like that to begin with. That's how I feel about it, guys. And It's just, even with getting a girl's number nowadays, it's to the point where you think once you land the number, you've already done 95% of the battle. But again, a lot of the time, there's even more hoops and hurdles in games. Like, I had a friend of mine, we were out at the local Buffalo Wild Wings, and I think they had closed, they closed at 1 a.m. I'm not sure if they close that time every night, but he had a friend of mine, one of the three people there, had gotten one of the waitress's numbers, good looking girl. She was in her probably mid-20s. And she actually engaged in the conversation with him the next day, texting him something kind of flirty or whatever. He responded to her. She didn't respond. I guess she was at work. And then about 8 hours later, he double texts her again, whatever you want to call it. Now, we go into the Buffalo Wild Wings without the friend. So just me and another friend, not the third guy who got the number. Then the following day. And this waitress comes up to us trying to say how our friend's a creep and this kind of stuff because he like double texts her or something like that. And my friend literally called her and he's like, wait a second. You gave him your number. And she's trying to say, oh, well, I didn't like him. I'm like, wait a second, but you gave him your phone number? So what that tells me is that, number one, which it could be a few possibilities, but women have so many options now that they can just nonchalant, just brush a guy off like they're nothing. Or number two, they just wanted the attention and validation of having a guy text her or chase or whatever you want to call it. Got their validation, and then they were on to the next one. But either way, it's insane. Either way, it's ridiculous. I mean, no matter how you put it, that's not acceptable. And my point being, guys, is with these kind of hurdles in games, understand something. Men do not have time for that. Men who have responsibilities, jobs, family matters, hobbies, skills, they don't have time for these hurdles in games. And that's just my point with I've talked about previously, the lack of understanding for male leadership. When a woman comes into a man's life, they shouldn't want to make their life harder. They shouldn't want to make them have to play games at all like that. But I've seen it time and time again where they have to jump these hurdles in games. And again, like I mentioned, even when they get the number, even when they get the dates, even when they get in the relationships, it's more and more and more games. It's to the point where I even think, right, a lot of girls who I haven't been in a relationship in some time. I dated here and there, over the past few years. But a lot of the girls who I dated in the past, they were very big on trying to sell you something to try to pander to you, to try to appeal to you. Like I remember one girl, she's like, oh, I'm really into Jeeps. Jeeps are my favorite car. I drove a Jeep at the time. Another girl who, when I was a kid, I used to collect Bionicles, and she made some comment about liking Bionicles. She didn't even know how to say it right, Bionicles. But my point being is that saying things that aren't even true to try to pander to you, and I've heard people say that's something all girls do, whatever. But besides the point, trying to reel you in, trying to sell you on something, and then when you get in the relationship, then they just start to run amok. I mean, I've seen it so many times, even men who have women living with them. A woman takes over part of the house, starts putting her stuff there, and it could even be the man's house. It could even be a house the man paid for, the man is paying rent on, and he just happens to let her stay with him. Like, even I was over at someone's house who is living with a girl, and I was like, hey, could we, is it cool if we leave and hang out somewhere else? And he's like, oh, let me ask her permission. She was like doing her own thing in the room or something like that. And I'm like, thinking to myself, like, dude, which I should have had this conversation with him after. I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, why do you need to ask her permission to hang out? And again, that's really the problem, is a lot of men allow themselves to get walked all over by women. They allow themselves to get disrespected. They allow themselves really to not be the leaders, to not be a leader at all. And what's so crazy to me is, think about it this way. Most men, if they had a friend who was toxic, if they had a friend who was actively a detriment to their life, if they had a friend who was a hater, making backhanded comments, trying to prevent you from achieving your goals, your mission, your purpose, things you need to focus on, a distraction, they'd probably be pretty quick to get rid of them, or not, or at the very least distance themselves from that person, not associate with them as much. But I don't see men doing the same thing when it comes to relationships. Because the reality is a lot of men cannot handle being single. And I've touched on this in previous videos where being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. And being lonely is easy to fix. Take up hobbies, develop new skills, find like-minded people. That's how you fix being lonely. Men should be able to be fine, just fine, with being single. I've known so many men who have absolutely destroyed their lives because of lust, because of not being able to handle being single. Even someone I know who he had gotten with a girl who he met on a dating app. Obviously not the first place you should look. I mean, I've known people who have had success on dating apps, but they'll even tell you straight up if they were here in the room. They had to go through 5 to 10 very toxic relationships and interactions. That's not to mention how many dates and flaking and ghosting and all this kind of stuff. And the hurdles and games they had to play to finally get a good one. My point being is that he met this girl on a dating app, and she actually was living with him. He got her pregnant. She kicked him out of the house. And I touched on that story in a previous video, but I didn't add the second part. So he moved back with his parents, and then he got with another girl on a dating app who was older, who was a single mother, and now got her pregnant, and the same cycle happened again. She kicked him out. She was looking for someone to get her pregnant so she could get more money. And I guarantee you she's going to come after him for child support. But and this guy was young. He's not a bad looking dude. And that's the craziest part. These dudes you see falling for this kind of stuff, doing stuff. It's like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, seriously, bro, wake up. It's like you almost want to grab him, like scream at him. For anyone who knows what I'm talking about, when you have a friend like that, or even someone who you don't know that well, but you're an acquaintance with, like you almost just want to grab him and like scream at him. Just seeing him do this kind of stuff, man. It's like, you're destroying your life for lust. You're destroying your life because you just can't handle being single. It's crazy. I don't know where this whole thing of men's self-worth being dictated by like how many women they've been with comes from. Part of being a man is having self-control, being able to control lust. Being able to focus on things and not be derailed so easily. It's just, it's rough. I mean, it's really rough, guys. And it's really rough to see men and good men fall for this kind of stuff. And like even a while back, one of the dates I went on, and I've talked about using dating apps in the past, which even back then dating apps were different. They were still trash, but they were different back then. But she had drove super far to hang out with me. Like, it was more than an hour away, and this was at 11 night, so I already kind of knew what it was going to be about. I was like, okay, this is just about hook up and whatever. But she had come over, and classic here with dating apps, but she was very different than in the pictures. But I still had a respect. Talked to her, things were cool, whatever. Didn't end up doing anything with her. And she had left, and I noticed that I was banned on the app, which probably is a blessing in disguise because they're a waste of time anyway. But I was banned on the dating app. And I honestly don't know what the heck happened, but what I speculate is that this girl, out of spite, was upset that I wouldn't hook up with her, whatever you want to call it, and she drove so far, whatever, that she just was like, okay, I'm going to get back at this guy out of spite. And I've seen crazy, making that case look like nothing, crazy manipulative things out of spite, to the point where I'll say, like, honestly, I don't really trust people in general. I don't trust women. Look, you shouldn't just trust people. You should not do that, because especially in the cases I've heard with false allegations made, men being taken to the cleaners, fake no contact order, fake restraining order, off false allegations. I've even heard of situations where a girl will get a restraining order, which I think is like a 2-week temporary time, depending on the state or whatever. And during that 2 weeks, they will text the guy. The guy texts them back, and now the guy's in trouble for reaching out to them. But it's the craziest part is that And again, I hope it's not like this in other states. I've heard some people say that some are worse than others, but the girl who got the restraining order, the protection order, reaches out to the man, right? So you'd think, wait a second, that should automatically be expunged. That's defamation of character. If you're going to say someone is a threat to you or whatever you want to call it, and you are getting a no contact order, yet you're reaching out to them, that doesn't make any sense. You should be held for liability. That's straight up fraud. That's straight up lying. But a man can actually get in trouble for responding to a text message if she engages with you. And the girl, from what I've seen, from what I've heard from other men who have dealt with this, gets no punishment whatsoever. I mean, you got to just be careful. Like the only thing I can really say, if you are going to choose a date, whatever you want to call it, you have to have really good discernment, and to the point where, look, I've heard some people say that girls with no red flags, all of a sudden there's a flip of a switch. They move in with you, whatever you want to call it. There's a number of years you're with them, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like a full 180 flip. And that should scare people. That should. But again, tell me what is worse. Because that's not paranoia to me. That's just living in reality. That's just seeing other people's experiences and not wanting the same thing to happen to you. Because understand something. There are some times where you should learn from other people's experiences, because if the same thing happens to you, you might not be able to recover. You might not be able to recover, or it might take a number of years to recover. For anyone who's dealt with a toxic relationship, as I have myself, you understand what I'm talking about. It takes time to recover from that. But my point being is that you got to be careful nowadays. You really got to be careful nowadays. You have to watch your own back. You have to be aware of the kind of tactics and things that are out there. That's what it is, guys.